The most important skill in chess, in my opinion, actually has nothing to do with openings or endgames or tactics. It's actually not a technical skill at all, but it is one that you can practice and that you can develop and get better at. And that skill is focus. Have you ever been playing a game where you were winning and doing really well, and then you kind of relaxed, and then after sort of relaxing into it, you ended up making a dumb mistake and losing the game? I suspect we've all been there. And so today I want to show you a game where this happened to me. And I also learned kind of a few specific ways that I seem to mess up after I kind of relax and lose focus. And I hope that these are helpful for you as well. So let's dive in and have a look. So this is a game that I played at Chess Club with my friend Kevin, and he was playing with the white pieces, and we've played lots of games against each other. In this one, he played the English. I like to play the King's Indian against the English, and I've gotten a bit better at this. We played several games that kind of ended up in this sort of position. I've learned that in this kind of game, pushing this C pawn is better often than pushing the E pawn. I think you can push the E pawn. I just haven't really kind of learned the thing with pushing the E pawn is with the knight on E2 instead of F3, it allows white to very quickly get F4 in and kind of undermine this center. So expanding on this side, I've had pretty good luck with. I'm not like really good at the theory, but the idea seems to work for me. So get the knight out. And then the thing to kind of always keep in mind is that if this bishop opens up, which it will eventually, it can be very strong. And so something I like to do is just put my rook on B8, and then it also gives me the ability to potentially like expand over here, and the rook is just adding another defender to this pawn. So all pretty standard stuff at this point. H3 I think is pretty common and a little bit annoying. It means I can't bring my bishop out there or the knight. Oh yes, actually it's to prevent me from putting the knight there because he wants to put his bishop on E3, which you'll see in just a minute, because otherwise if he put his bishop on E3 first, I would just put the knight there, and then that's super annoying for him. So I played A6, he played A4, just trying to make it harder for me to expand over here. And then I played bishop D7, bishop E3, as I mentioned, and then knight B4. And I don't know if this is really like the best idea for this kind of setup, but it just feels like a pretty good spot for the knight. Like I'm putting pressure on this pawn, which is only being defended by the queen, and you know, I'm taking a couple of other squares away from white that he can't use right away. So it seems like a pretty nice spot. Now, rook B1 and then bishop C6. Actually, at this point, like I didn't really know what to do, and to be honest, I'm not quite sure why he put the rook on B1. But yeah, I wasn't quite sure what the plan was here. So I just felt like maybe this was a bit better for my bishop. It kind of makes it harder for him to push that pawn, maybe, because then I can get rid of his strong light squared bishop. I don't know. But he moved his knight down to D5. I traded and just put the bishop back on D7, and that's fine. And then he pushed D4. So he's just trying to kind of undermine my sort of nice pawn chain, try to break things up a little bit in the center. But this allowed me to play bishop F5, which I felt like was quite a nice move. It hits the rook, and it makes my bishop really powerful. And now, you know, my knight can potentially go to one of those squares. This is where I kind of felt like the tide was starting to turn in the game. Not that like it didn't feel like he was winning, but it felt still kind of even, and we were still kind of just struggling through it. But now it felt like I might actually be better. So he played rook C1, and then I played knight D3. Now, the engine says that this is a blunder, and actually it's fine. He just got the rook out of the way, and it was totally fine. But it turns out that if he plays rook C3, then this is actually a really strong move, because so it looks like my knight can just take this pawn, but actually then my knight is trapped. And my best bet is to capture this pawn, and then my knight gets recaptured, and now white is up a knight for 2 pawns. And if I don't take that pawn, like I can go back down here instead, but then white is going to win this pawn, and now maybe my knight is trapped, actually. So it's that's why this move was technically a blunder if he had found rook C3, but he didn't. He played rook C2 instead, and so the game goes on. I played queen B6, trying to put some pressure here, and after takes, then he moves his rook over and I grab this pawn. And this is where I'm feeling pretty good. The eval, I believe, is around -2. Yeah, -1.9. So things are looking pretty good for black. I'm up a pawn, and I just kind of need to, consolidate my advantage and try to win this game. At this point, he played knight d4, which I thought was a good move because this bishop was really strong and he wanted to push it back. And he actually, he pushed that bishop back, and then he kind of pushed my queen away from where it was and just kind of made my position not quite as nice, moved my pieces away from maybe their more ideal spots. So what I was looking at here now was this open C file looks really nice. And I should probably try to get a rook on there and try to, get active and start causing problems on his side of the board. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, I'm feeling good. I'm winning. And this is where I kind of relaxed because he played rook e1, and I went ahead with my plan to put a rook on c8. But I completely missed that my e-pawn was hanging. And as I said, the big reason is because I just relaxed here. I was like, all right, he's activating his rook. That's fine. I'm going to activate my rook, right? I'm winning. I should be able to just do that without thinking too hard about it. But I think the other thing is when you relax, I think the types of mistakes that you're maybe a little more susceptible to making anyway, you just become more likely to actually make those sorts of mistakes. And this is a kind of mistake that I have made before. Basically, we're in the middle game. This is a central pawn, and it's still on its home square, right? And so I think in my brain, it must be defended. So I just kind of look past it and don't even look at whether this pawn is actually defended, because it probably is. It's in a spot that seems like it should be defended, right? And so since I kind of relaxed and wasn't being quite as careful because I felt like I was winning, I totally missed that this pawn is actually not defended. And so, of course, he captured the pawn. Basically, there are a few good moves for me here. One very nice move is just bishop f6, and then that defends the pawn. But even just something like rook f e8 would have done the trick, no problem. But anyway, I blundered, and he grabbed this pawn. But it should still be pretty drawish, right? Now material is equal because I had already won a pawn earlier, but now that advantage is gone, but I should be able to still, this should still be a pretty even game. But now I start to have some problems. This pawn is isolated. Of course, so is this one. So our pawn structures are symmetrical. Also, now my bishop is hanging and I have to deal with that. And so there's just kind of stuff that I have to deal with that I didn't have to just, a move ago. So basically, I had still lost my focus. I wasn't kind of back in the zone where I need to think hard, I need to play well, I need to, make every single move count, right? Anyway, the game went on. I brought my rook over to defend this bishop, and then he played knight back here, and I brought my rook. Basically, the idea I was looking at here is I wanted to get my rook active. I knew that he could potentially try to stack on this e file, but what I wanted to do was pick up this pawn, and then I was looking at getting my rook on the back rank and pinning the queen to the king, right? And so he plays queen e1. And this is kind of a neat move. And again, at this point, I'm not paying as much attention to this as I should have. I'm not seeing the danger like I should be. I'm seeing that this is possible, but I'm well, this square is defended by the rook and the bishop. So I should still be good. And then, if there's some crazy tactic, I can always just kind of put my bishop in the way, right? Which that's never a good way to think, you want to try to look for these tactics and figure out what's there and what could happen. But anyway, I felt like the e8 square was well defended, and so I went ahead with my plan. I grabbed this pawn, and I figured, I'm threatening to come up here and either pin the queen, or if the queen gets moved, then this will come with a check or something. As it turns out, even something happens here, which I'm going to show you, but even besides the tactic that I missed, that I'll show you in a minute, this threat actually doesn't work here. And that was part of what I missed. I didn't calculate it well enough because basically, if the rook moves back, this rook blocks, and I just calculated that then I can take the queen, takes, and then at least I'm still up a rook, and that comes with check. But I didn't realize, that the knight is defending this square, and so it actually just ends up being a trade. this thing that looks like such a good tactic, pinning the queen against the king, actually doesn't work. And so this move creates no threat at all. And then Kevin captured my bishop, which, you know, is kind of a brilliant move, because the reason is now if I take the rook, then he has this check and he wins my rook and he's up a full bishop. It turns out, actually, so this actually didn't happen. I didn't capture here. I instead went ahead with my plan. I said, well, doesn't this still work, right? Can't I still just pin this queen? And we talked about that, and I'll show you how it went. But it turns out that if takes, check, block, and takes, then this is actually still okay, because now I can sacrifice my rook to take that knight, which was defending this rook. And then after takes and takes, this is actually totally equal. And it, again, it's basically a draw. And actually, in terms of material, well, yeah, no, I was going to say in terms of material, it's actually a little bit better for black, but then white is just going to grab this pawn, and now technically material is completely equal. So that would have been actually perfectly fine. But instead, I said, well, doesn't this work? And we played it out. So first he captures here, so he grabs that rook for free. I block, and then block, takes, and this is where I resigned, because now I'm down like a rook and a knight for just one pawn. And there's like, I looked for a while here to see, like, is there anything tricky? Are there any complications or any kind of counterplay that I can make happen here? But no, there's nothing. I'm pretty much done for at this point. So I resigned. And I think really, like, the moral of the story is you have to keep your focus for the entire game. Like, you can't just keep your focus until you feel like you're winning, especially against a strong opponent. If you make any mistakes, that good opponent who is in a worse position and so is looking for any chance that they can find, they're going to find those chances, right? If you make any mistakes. And so maintaining focus is key. And of course, this can be a little bit easier for shorter games. It can be harder for like long tournament games where, you know, you have to maintain like your top level of focus for several hours. And in this case, actually, like, we were playing at club. We weren't playing with a clock, but we were, you know, not taking it like super seriously. We were trying to play, you know, reasonably quick. We weren't like spending a really long time on every move. It was just kind of one of those games for fun and so on. But I feel like it's a really good example of kind of relaxing and losing focus when you're winning. And I feel like that's something that is so common and something that you really have to, I don't know, like recognize when it's happening so that you can see that it's happening and really try to kind of focus in and say, okay, yes, I'm winning, but I need to earn the win from here. I can't make any mistakes or else I'm going to throw the game away. So yeah, as I said, I think the most important skill in chess in a lot of ways is maintaining focus. And it's really foundational to everything else you learn and being able to apply everything else you learn to your game. So I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope that you took away a couple of little tidbits of tips and things that you can try in your next games to try to maintain focus and reduce the number of mistakes. If you did find something helpful, please hit that like button. It's very helpful. And make sure to subscribe as well. And I will see you on the next video.